Hi there, welcome back to the Dylan Rounds case. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my thoughts, reaction and analysis in response to Dr. Todd Grande, who's done their own analysis in recent time of the Dylan Rounds case. Some kind of psychologist or something, an expert in those fields, has a wealth of knowledge, whatever, right? Am I in the same position? Obviously not. But I can still use common sense, and I have done my own analysis over time when it's come to the Dylan Rounds case, the Kenny Veach case, etc., including the motives and reasons behind why someone like Brenner could be responsible and why he would do what he supposedly did. And in a sense, Dr. Todd Grande gave his own thoughts and analysis, though you could say it was a little bit short in general. As for the video, about 12 minutes long. I don't know what other people think of the original clip. If you want to check out Dr. Todd Grande's video, feel free to do so. It's probably a couple of weeks old now or so, but just wanted to catch up with all this talk, right? Because there's been some recent videos. I still need to address the one where Candice Cooley appeared on Profiling Evil. I'll get to that eventually, maybe tomorrow or the day after. For those people that are currently here in this live premiere, welcome. Be sure to share your thoughts, opinions, reactions, whether you agree or not with what I say or what Dr. Todd Grande said. Just let me know your thoughts. If you want to elaborate or you've got questions, leave them down below in the comment section and I can respond back to comments and clear stuff up there, okay? I don't know if we'll have time to look at the comments today in response to Dr. Todd Grande's points. I mean, to summarize in general, the majority of people that were commenting on Dr. Todd Grande's analysis of the case of Dylan weren't exactly fully informed of the case or the reasoning behind stuff. They seemed a bit out of the loop. One individual did show up, known as Corey, supposedly the real Corey, and shared her thoughts, partially or mostly agreeing with Todd Grande, but I don't know, it just felt like the overall atmosphere with the rest of the people commentating were what you would kind of get from the official Dylan Rounds Facebook page, where it seems a bit one-dimensional and not everybody is in the loop up to date of what's happened, what's gone on. Not everybody knows all the small details, okay? So what I'm going to do today is kind of summarize what Todd Grande was talking about and points he was referencing. I can add in some additional points of information if necessary and if I can remember, but there were maybe a couple of mistakes made by Todd Grande. Now, to acknowledge, with his video being short, around 12 minutes long, is basically a summary of the entire case, and to be fair, it's lasted for over 2 years now. To summarise all that's gone down within that case over a 2-year period into a 12-minute video, of course you're going to be missing out on key information. You just can't fit it all into one short summary, right? But I guess you could argue and say Todd Grande did a decent job in trying to summarise it all whilst giving the timeline of events, how it followed, although somewhat limited, like with the phone pings, the times of the phone pings, the timing. But some of the other key dates were mentioned in general, leading up to Brenner's arrest and when he got charged, etc. But we'll get to that eventually, because the way Todd Grande structured his video, he kind of gave like a brief description of the story itself of the case, how things played out, and then some factors to take in mind, and then some sub-factors and external points, acknowledging other viewpoints, very roughly, theories, ideas, then reverting back to his own thoughts and analysis. I said limited. And I watched it. I don't know if you have. If you want to, feel free to do so. But at this moment in time, I'm just going to give you my thoughts, okay? And you can let me know what you think in the comments. Before we go any further, shout out to Sasquatch for their presence last night and supporting the channel. Very good of them. If anyone else wants to catch up on my most recent videos, be sure to click the top right corner of the screen, I symbol. If you click on that, You'll find a drop-down box of some previous videos you may have not seen before. Make sure to catch up on them when you have time. And in addition, down below in the comment section, if you have a quick check, there is a pinned comment by me with some additional links if you wish to check them out, or if you want to support the channel in some alternative way, it's all available there. So that all being said and done, I've just simply got some bullet points next to me, which I'll just try and read out and elaborate if needed. So Todd Grande gave just a brief introduction about Dylan Rounds. Dylan from Idaho, with a few extra details as well. Rigby, Idaho. Okay, fair enough. That seems to mainly check out. Next point that was mentioned by Todd was Dylan lived with his parents, Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds. Not exactly. Isn't that wrong? For a certain period of time, that was true. But I believe around the age of 4 years old or 6 years old, Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds had a divorce, broke up. And that was discussed in either Heavy D's interview, I believe, the second one, in the Greyshed property, if you remember, in 2022, where it was mentioned, Heavy D asked Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds, the question of, would Dylan Rounds have been hurt, impacted negatively by that event in the past? Candice Cooley kind of played it off and said, nah, his age, he wouldn't have really picked up on it. It would have been fine. But Justin Rounds was a bit more sensitive and said, well, actually, it probably didn't do much good, right? That stability not quite there. So that's just a little factor there. So up to a point, Dylan Rounds in the presence of Candice Cooley and Justin. But what the general public have said and raised is over time, it was Justin Rounds that took care of the children, from Dylan to the daughter, can't remember her name on the spot, to Colton, right? And if there's anyone else in between. So Justin really put in the effort there. And I think that might have been where some of the criticism came from Justin Rounds in 2022 on a Facebook post when calling Candice Cooley out, saying at the time, Candice Cooley only seems to care about the children, such as Dylan Rounds, such as an event like now when it's too late, and only when the cameras show up, she does too. It was a dig at Candice Cooley because I guess Justin Rounds was looking after the children and Candice Cooley wasn't. And some other people were pushing that too. So Todd Grande missed that out, which I think is a critical key point. Okay. The next additional point that was made was Larry Rounds, the grandfather of Dylan Rounds, have 50-50 and buying the farm in Lucin, Utah. That seems to check out. No issues there. But then Todd Grande then said the farm was bought near to Lucin. No, that's wrong. From what I'm aware of, because I've looked at the map, from what all the news articles and media outlets and video coverage formally, from what all the parents' families have said about it, Dylan was in Lucin, Utah when he went missing. And Dylan's farm is in Lucin, Utah. Not near to Lucin, but within. So geographically, Todd Grande got that wrong. So let's just correct that. The next point made by Todd, which was arguably incorrect once again, he labelled the area as an undesirable location for farming. Roughly in the words what he said, an undesirable place. Not exactly a popular hotspot, hence why the price of the land was probably cheaper than other areas out there, which is more rich in nutrients, growth, the environment itself, the weather, the temperature. But Dylan saw it as a challenge and was determined and confident. That wasn't mentioned exactly by Todd Grande, so he missed out on that key point. And further backstory, when it comes to Lucin, back in the past, a railroad community. And you look at it wider, okay, some of the areas further out, outskirts, there were stronger communities and more people present in the past. And there was even like either huts or buildings, temporary ones, which were laid out in the area for the workers or the people that lived there, maybe temporary, long-term, whatever. There was a stronger presence of people way back in the past, like the railroad community, but there was also a presence of farmers way back in the past Dylan Rounds, besides being passionate about farming, wanted to rejuvenate the area, bring it back to what it once was from the past. In the past, farmers out there growing the crops, somewhat successful, right? It was doable in the past, but ever since, people have given up. The challenge, the effort may be too demanding, but Dylan Rounds took it upon himself to be successful, and he was getting close to doing that, supposedly. So I think that's a critical point missed out by Todd Grande, which is unfortunate, but I thought I'd just add in the extra details, okay? The next point that was slightly incorrect, how it was worded. Todd went on about the farm area where Dylan lived when he was working on the land, which wouldn't be that long term when living there, as we know. But Todd only referred to one camper being present. Now, in terms of living in one camper, true, temporary, but there were two campers, and Todd forgot to mention that. The second camper, although not playing a major role in the case of Dylan Rounds and the disappearance, it was a trailer which, I guess, held material, equipment, items, bits and bobs. But it should be acknowledged, right? As for everything that's present on the land, which is owned by Dylan, in possession of Dylan, it wasn't mentioned in Todd's video, okay? Next point mentioned about James Brenner, saying he had no permission to be there with regards to the Grainshed property, describing Brenner as a squatter. Now, Todd isn't the only person to have labelled Brenner as a squatter. The family, Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds, have referred to Brenner as a squatter. Just about all of the media news outlets have regarded Brenner as a squatter. But from what some locals have stated themselves, and people that own the land or have the presence within the area but not actually living there, such as Corey, if I'm correct in saying that, through some kind of agreement or understanding between certain people out there, that Brenner was able to have permission to be near the Grainshed property. There was some kind of agreement in the background, so technically it wasn't squatting. And that's been a long-standing debate whether he's squatting or not. Most of the formal people and higher-ups refer to Brenner as a squatter, but the general public and certain locals refer to Brenner as not squatting. So who do you trust more, right? So there's a few inaccuracies there. Next point to move on to is, yes, so the next point was mentioned by Todd Grande, giving a possible reason behind why Brenner was out there in the open, desolate place, a low population, away from police, away from all different types of services and monitoring, because there was no cameras out there either. And Todd Grande said perhaps Brenner living out there to avoid the police, to avoid getting into further trouble, etc. But it wasn't directly avoiding the police, whether it be that 2021 aggravated assault and a warrant, which was standing, arrest warrant, and pending. It wasn't Brenner avoiding that exactly. No, what originally happened, and I'll just make a few corrections now because Todd Grande failed to include it in his video. What happened was some years back when Brenner was living in Montello, Nevada, the outskirts, closer to Bald Eagle Mountain, so more east, okay, as if you're going towards Lucin, but before the border, crossing over, and before the mountains. Brenner, in his own trailer, doing his own thing, he ends up going elsewhere, doing something he wasn't present at the time. Supposedly the stove or the hob left on, gas canisters or some kind of canisters left within the trailer, causes a reaction, boom, explodes, on fire, destroyed. Some people have suggested maybe it was done as an act of revenge, but others, most have claimed that it was accidental and Brenner was clumsy, forgetful. So Brenner didn't have anywhere to live, so then he stayed with Kurt Wadsworth for a certain period of time. And over that time, Brenner getting in a bit of trouble here and there. And I think the final breaking point was some fight at Saddle Saw Bar within Montello, Nevada, within the building or just outside, getting into a fight. And that was like the final straw of Brenner causing too much trouble. Other people are getting harmed. It's not good for the community. It's not good for anyone. We need to find a resolve. And then eventually that's what led to Brenner moving away from Montello and going over to Lucin. And I think Don Hatley played a role as well, because Don Hatley was already in Lucin before Brenner got there. So Don could have put in a good word or highlighted and suggested, hey, come over here. And because Brenner is long-time good friends with Don Hatley, it seems like the right move, the right decision. And it also benefits the Montello community because they don't have to see Brenner again and is less likely for trouble and people getting hurt. So everybody was a winner, right? So it wasn't Brenner on the run from the police. No, it was Brenner advised and agreements made between different people to move on, and Kurt Wadsworth was in agreement as well. And through those agreements, that's what enabled Brenner to be able to, well, as people label, squat, but not actually squat, and act as like a caretaker of the Grainshed property or some kind of security guy. Not formally though, right? So just wanted to mention those points which Todd did miss out on. There's a few more bullet points we'll get onto, okay? So kind of like a brief timeline of what Todd was referring to with regards to the events leading up to the disappearance of Dylan. So reference to the 27th, that Dylan Rounds planting his seeds nighttime at his own farm, going into late nighttime, which was, what was it now? Was it like something like 11:35 to 11:45 or something? 11:30 to 11:45, somewhere around that time, if you remember, because I did my map analysis. You had the campers, not the campers, you had the hikers camping out at Little Pigeon Mountains, which is south. So where the people were camping at Little Pigeon Mountains would have been looking north, and they would have overseen Dylan's farm, tractor light being turned on, work being done late at night, passing that on to Candice Cooley as like a witness report, and it's supposedly being confirmed in agreement, consensus that it was Dylan doing his thing. But in addition, on the 27th, earlier on in the morning, about 10 a.m, Dylan Rounds with Kurt Wadsworth and Taylina, Kurt's daughter, outside a Saddle Saw bar, hanging out in Montello, Nevada, having discussions, and Dylan saying, I've got to get on with stuff, and also later on get on with the seeding, which was done at night time, because I guess Dylan was busy throughout the day doing other stuff, fetching parts and items for other people, like custom farm work. I don't know if it involved Sheldon or if it involved the other guy. It's hard to remember all the names that Dylan was doing custom farm work for. But basically, Dylan was busy on the 27th. One unfortunate key timestamp, a part of the timeline that was excluded and not included by Todd Grande, which is very unfortunate, is the 25th of May 2022, okay? A few days before the 27th. And that would have been a Wednesday, I believe. And that's when Dylan Rounds was driving down Tacoma Road on the Montello side, across the border, and came across, unknown to him at the time, Chase Venstra, in which Chase Venstra's son did work for Dylan Rounds sometime in the past, on and off, short term, but Dylan wasn't quite aware of it at the time. Dylan, regardless, decided to help Chase Venstra pick him up and take him down to Montello. But when it came to Chase Venstra, he was bloodied, he was missing a shoe or something, he looked roughed up, and that was because earlier on in the day, he was gathered by a group of guys, including a rancher, the husband of a wife, in which Chase Venstra was kind of peeping Tom, stalking, watching in a creepy way, inappropriate behaviour, and on top, stealing a firearm from somewhere else and some other items and camo, maybe appearing as a threat towards the rancher's wife's husband, and the husband warned Chase Venstra not to come back, but Chase did. And then Chase paid the price and got beat up by a group of his guys. And then Chase ended up moving away because the rancher's wife's husband said, we're going to call the police on you. So that's why Venstra left and was seen hiding in a bush or something, a sage bush. And a near gravel pathway appeared, and then Dylan driving down, and then Dylan picking up Chase Venstra, right? introduced at that moment. And then onwards, Chase Venstra seen as a person of interest short term, and then eventually his name cleared. But some people still to this day strongly believe that Chase Venstra alongside Robert Aviles play a strong role, and that Chase Venstra is the one responsible and is the killer in the eyes of Corey. So it's interesting how, even though Corey was in agreement with Todd Grande and his points, Corey and Todd Grande also going on about James Brenner being the one responsible, Corey, I don't know if Corey mentioned that about her disagreement to that point. Then again, it depends which Corey shows up, to be honest, because you got the bloody fake Corey in the past, and in recent time, the real one turned up. So a bit of a shit show, to be honest, there. Let's just be realistic. But yeah, the 25th of May excluded in Todd's video, a critical beginning key timestamp and date within the timeline of Dylan's disappearance leading up to it. But it was neglected in Todd's video. And the reason why it should have been included is because universally it's been mentioned so many times. That was like the beginning of it all. The 25th, Chase Venstra, strange, creepy, weird looking guy, bloodied, missing a shoe. What's going on there? Is he the killer of Dylan? Was that the last person? No, it wasn't to see Dylan, it was Brenner. But you get the idea. It was mentioned so much all over the place. I'm surprised Todd didn't refer to it. He only referred to the 27th. So it's lacking in depth there. Mentioning one extra date wouldn't have extended the video that long, to be honest. But anyway, after the 27th, Todd mentioned the next day, Dylan calling the grandmother Karen Rounds, but the name wasn't mentioned, Karen Rounds, just called the grandmother. That was the 28th of May, which had been Saturday time. Unfortunately, Todd did not include any timestamps around, such as near to 6 in the morning or so. Close to that, that's when Dylan woke up, and that it was at 6:51 a.m. when the call was made to the grandmother, roughly, and then it was 6:58 a.m. when a second call was made by Dylan to Brenner, but no call answered by Brenner. Dylan ended up going down, supposedly, to Grangeshed property, 7:03 a.m., the timestamp roughly of near to the Grangeshed. So it appears that Dylan, in possession of his own phone, near to the Grangeshed, because he's parking the grain truck in the shed, as he told his grandmother, as Todd Grande explained briefly, at 6:51 a.m. And then after 7:03, kind of went quiet. Then what occurred was the time-lapse footage, which was later retrieved and found later on down the line in the case, which was at 7:27 a.m. You can roughly round it up to 7:30 a.m. if you want. So it's kind of like a 30-minute difference from when Dylan made it down to the Grangeshed property and then when the phone ended up in the possession of Brenner's trailer, with the footage of Brenner cleaning a gun with blood on him and DNA of Dylan belonging to Dylan on Brenner's shirt besides the blood. And Brenner also blood on his hands, sleeves, and also seen washing his hands clean from the blood and stuff. The top was later found by police when they searched his trailer. So more evidence which was pushing in the direction that Brenner was responsible. Now, I went off a bit too much there, I'll be honest with you, okay? But all that, what I explained in terms of the timestamps, the phone pings, the dates, the times, etc., wasn't mentioned by Todd Grande. Very unfortunate, because it is pretty important and critical. Now, there are some further timestamps days which weren't mentioned by Todd, such as it was by 7:43 a.m. when then, in possession of Dylan's phone, presumably Brenner, because Dylan's death long gone by that, with the time-lapse footage demonstrating it. Dylan's phone then ended up after 7:43 a.m. at Dylan's farm, so Brenner could have been down there looking for stuff to steal, to use in the disposure of Dylan Rounds, possibly. 30 minutes that phone of Dylan spent at Dylan's farm, so he must have been looking thoroughly and checking. And then later returning back at Brenner's trailer, and then it remained there all the way up to the point of supposedly, was it 2:51? I think it was 2:51 a.m. p.m. 2:51 p.m. supposedly the final phone ping into Lucent Pond. But then there's that contradicting original timestamp later, an hour or two later, which then ended up being the final phone ping. It was a bit back and forth with that, and it was so bloody annoying. Do you get me? It was never truly clarified because it was a bit back and forth. But regardless, it just wasn't quite there in Todd's video. Basically, after Todd's point about the 28th and Dylan in the morning calling the grandmother, then Todd said, then suddenly on the 30th, reported as missing. Who by though wasn't included. It was Candice Cooley who reported Dylan as missing. It was Candice Cooley who was on the way down because either on the same day earlier in the morning or so, reaching out to other family members saying, have you heard from Dylan? No, radio silence, something must be wrong. Candice Cooley on the way down, just in rounds 2. They live apart separately because of the divorce, but they're both on the way down. Candice Cooley, whilst in her vehicle, reaches out to Don Hatley, who's within the area of Lucing, because that's where he lives. Those two, Brenna and Don Hatley, searching about a day before on the 29th, supposedly, didn't see anything. But on the 30th, it was Candice Cooley that mentioned that when in a conversation with Don over the phone, Don almost gave the thumbs up, a green light to say, yes, Candice Cooley, you can report your son as missing. Almost as like he's giving permission for Candice Cooley to report her own son missing. Why would one have to take permission from just a person who's not even related to the family? I think it might have been partially because Don's searching about looking for Dylan and then saying, well, we've not seen anything, so you might as well report him as missing now. I don't know, it just seemed a little bit of a red flag, as Candice Cooley highlighted. But yeah, on the 30th, they finally got down there, searching about. Todd did mention about the boot situation, and before that, Candice Cooley and Justin Rounds being at Dylan's vehicle and Justin breaking into the back window, right? Nothing found in there, probably a bit reckless to be honest. Todd didn't mention about the fact that there was supposedly the police presence or a detective on site watching Justin Rounds, Candice Cooley breaking into Dylan's truck. They just stood back and let it happen. What? Shouldn't the detective or police force have said, hey, don't be touching that, it could be key evidence? But, you know, they just stood back. That's what Candice Cooley mentioned, I believe, in the documentary from what we last looked at, okay? So that was missing from Todd's video. Then Todd started going on about early June, so 1st and 2nd of June, gun key fob returned back by whoever. Wasn't directly mentioned as to who's responsible, so maybe that was the best way of wording it, considering how those discussions have gone. But Todd, once again, okay, you mentioned the 30th of May. Well, what about the 31st of May? Final day in the month. Todd didn't mention that, and that was a critical point. Just like the 25th of May, the 31st was the day where psychic ex-girlfriend of Kurt Wadsworth supposedly reached out to Kurt about information. Kurt then may have taken it upon himself as opportunistic behaviour possibly, or maybe because he cares about Dylan. Either way, decided to reach out to police, decided to reach out to Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds, about a tip-off of the possibility that Dylan Rounds is held hostage in Montello by Chase Venstra, Robert Aviles, somewhere within Montello, outer skirts or the town itself. That grabbed the attention eventually of the police. And some say Candice Cooley stayed behind, others say she didn't, so that's a bit of a mess. But at least Justin Rounds and the police force went down to Montello, Nevada on the 31st and spent some time down there checking. False lead, didn't lead to anything, wasted time. But was it a good opportunity and a decoy in whoever returning gun and key fob back? Well, if you believe in that way, as to someone being responsible, a suspect, well then yeah, it could apply. But for the others out there who supposedly know who's responsible, well, it doesn't quite tie in line, not quite the same way. But yeah, Todd failed to mention it about the hostage situation with Dylan, the false call and everything. Critical key moment within the case, to be honest, early on. And it could have been a decoy too. So that's disappointing to see. Though Todd did mention about the gun key fob having no prints upon it, like it was wiped clean, which could be considered suspicious. Why would you be removing any traces? Well, if you're a suspect, removing traces because you don't want to be traced back and you don't want to be caught. But if it was an innocent person or people that decide to return it back, they don't want the blame pointing to them or getting in trouble, so they would clean it down. And that can be briefly explained now because supposedly what Corey has said, what Bob Farrell is obsessed about, and other people too who are acting on behalf of Justin Rounds, etc., have stated, have claimed as a fact, not me, but them, that it wasn't Brenner, it wasn't Don Hartley, it wasn't Dylan himself. It was Colton, Dylan Rounds' brother, and one of Dylan Rounds' friends, JD, or another friend of Dylan, that were responsible, that went down to the trailer earlier on, before Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds got down there, not quite sure in terms of the dates, but got down there early, went into the trailer themselves of Dylan's, came across the key fob, and I guess the gun, even though Candice Cooley did say that Dylan would always keep it in his own truck, unless they also, no, I believe key fob possibly in the trailer, got into the trailer early, but also accessed Dylan's vehicle to look for clues, hence why seat being adjusted and hence why it was locked afterwards. I would understand that because Colton and the friend of Dylan being responsible, thinking we probably should lock up, you know, we don't want anything being stolen. That's smart thinking. Taking it down to Dylan's grandfather, Larry Rounds, with the items, and I guess being told probably should return them back, but because they handled the stuff, Larry cleaned the items down, and I believe Larry himself returned the items. But supposedly the talk was by Candice Cooley, unaware to all of that, even though Justin Rounds is aware of it supposedly, but Candice Cooley is in the dark. Very strange there. That's why I find it hard to believe in that outcome. Sounds like poor communication, or it just never happened. But Candice Cooley mentioned that when it happened, the 1st and 2nd of June or so, one followed by the other on each day, one item returned followed by the next day on the same location countertop. Found it one day, went back, found the other item in the same location, as mentioned by Todd Grande in his video, brief. But Candice Cooley did say that it seems like that the items that were returned back could have been done overnight time too, during night to avoid detection. So you're saying that Larry Rounds drove all the way down there to secretly put the items back. It just seems so dodgy. Maybe because you don't want to get in trouble. Maybe because you don't want to harm the crime scene, or you've already, if that's really the case, you've already effed it up, right? Cleaning it all down of prints, because I know you would have handled it yourself, or multiple people did. But just, besides everybody always calling out Candice Cooley or Justin Rounds for being reckless, breaking into Dylan's vehicle, etc., etc., what about the other supposed people then that got there earlier and returned the items back, etc.? Dylan's key fob, Dylan's gun. Items could have been used at some point, but gone to waste as evidence because there's no prints on them, wiped clean. None of that was mentioned by Todd Grande in terms of that extent, but Corey made it very clear in the past. Well, whichever Corey account did. Bob still believes in that, and so do certain viewers. Do I? I just find it hard to believe considering Candice Cooley is completely unaware of that and it's never been mentioned. Okay? Unless there's agreement in the background where they all know but they can't talk about it public because it would make them look bad, maybe. But it just seems very weird, right, in general. It's just weird stuff going on and very reckless in general. The next point that was mentioned by Todd, though, which was a key event, and I'm glad it was mentioned, was 2nd of June, spring cleaning, in which Brenner accessed the Grangeshed property, seen as like a crime scene, but never treated as one by Boxell County Sheriff's Office. Brenner going in and putting items in trash bags, about 4 to 8, and then taking them out, and then eventually disposing of them same day or day after or so. And supposedly from what Candice Cooley said, because she was on site and saw it herself, when Brenner did take the trash away, Don Hartley tagged along, and supposedly they were going down to Wendover. So clues as for the direction of where items were disposed of, possibility. But most of that, what I just mentioned there, Todd Grande failed to include those details. Very unfortunate. Todd also failed to include the details of that Brenner didn't just simply walk on in. No, he had to go to Dylan's grain truck, right? key crime scene, key evidence, right? Very important. And that Brenner was able to get into the truck, reverse or drive it out, get out, go back into the grain shed, and then bag the stuff up, whilst Candice Cooley stands back and whilst the police let it happen. And when the sheriff or the detective, I think it was the sheriff, approached Brenner just before Brenner got involved into what he was doing and questioned, what are you doing? Brenner just said, doing some spring cleaning, clearing some stuff out. And that was it. It was welcomed. It was acceptable. Possible key importance, evidence, DNA, etc., gone to waste and allowed to do so. Todd didn't mention that. Critical pieces of evidence gone to waste. Just like some other stuff as well. Just like further on, the vehicle data being deleted, lost because police gave a thumbs up so the family or friend could drive it on, drive it home, wherever, and it was lost. All these wasted opportunities, not mentioned by Todd Grande though. No strengths, well, certain strengths, not enough weaknesses. Not exactly balanced in the mindset of Todd Grande. Kind of disappointing, but maybe because the video was short, you can only mention so much. Take in mind, my video is about 36 minutes long, and I've mentioned much more. So it's kind of, maybe it's obvious, right? So there's got to be some understanding and fairness there with Todd's video. Let's just at least highlight that. But I just want to make it clear as to what happened and how things played out, because it wasn't fully explained by Todd. Some people will be missing important pieces of the puzzle, the jigsaw, hence why some of the people in the comment section aren't fully informed, as we saw. Well, as I saw, you may have seen it yourself. Now, moving on, there were some dates mentioned onwards by Todd. As I said, I've not mentioned every point that Todd mentioned because some of it that was perfectly okay. I didn't need to include here because it didn't really need to be corrected. So like the muzzle loader, the firearms, how they were retrieved eventually, how Don Hatley grasped on Brenner basically and said that the firearms were passed over, and Brenner getting in trouble for that. Brenner also getting in trouble for that arrest warrant from 2021, aggravated assault, I think with the lawn chair. So there was that on I think a 68 or a 69-year-old when that happened. Anything else mentioned? Brenner taken in on the 11th. Didn't mention about him being released the following day, but then also mentioned how on the 16th to the 19th, when there was more action, Todd mentioned that at least, and that's when Brenner was apprehended within that time period. I think it would have been the 16th or the 19th of June, and with that period. At the same time as when the phone was found on the 19th at Lucerne Pond, which Todd did mention, and also the time-lapse footage, as we said earlier on. So those critical pieces were mentioned, and then it moved on to Grande's analysis, mentioning key points, saying it was a bit all over the place, to be honest, but Todd Grande was saying how with the Dylan Rounds case, it became very popular. It was a very popular case, and it was partially or mainly caused by psychics. What is going on? Psychics? I didn't even hear much about them. I didn't really see much of them. There was a trend. It was degenerative. It was cancerous. It didn't help at all. It was misinformation. It was bullshit, okay? But what else is arguably BS, in fairness, is what Todd Grande said. The only reason why the Dylan Rounds case really became popular was because of the presence of psychics and stuff like that, and card readers. Bollocks, okay? Dylan Rounds' case to begin with wasn't exactly that popular, okay? It was more popular then compared to now, of course, but it was never really groundbreaking news compared to the other cases like Kylie Rodney or Idaho 4. That's why the true crime channels, the Zav Girls, the No Thanks, who else was there? Tyler Feller, etc. When they covered the Dylan Rounds case at the start, they already had a following. So with an audience, they brought attention to the case. They put it on the map, okay? Did I? No, but I did keep it alive when everyone else walked away from the case, including those named individuals from the start, who walked away, moved on to the hottest trend, Kylie Rodney because it was a blonde female and of a younger age, seen as more important than Dylan Rounds, as it was labelled by everybody else and news crews as well. Dylan Rounds forgotten about, kind of corrupt, right? That's why I stuck around. That's why I kept it alive single-handedly. It was important to do so, but other people didn't see it that way, okay? You had 10 to the power, or power to the 10, the other blonde female that came on in with a big audience following established channel, and some other channels too, covering the Dylan Rounds case. Very brief, very short, not consistent, not full on, not dedicated, but made an impact because it's a popularity contest at the end of the day, because they're more established. All these bigger channels, all these channels bigger than me significantly, put Dylan Rounds' case on the map in terms of YouTube, and then smaller creators on TikTok kind of did the same thing, but YouTube was the most influential part there. Now, Todd Grande referred to people as influencers that got involved with the case of Dylan Rounds. That's BS, that's bollocks, okay? Influencers tend to be of a certain target, target audience, a certain theme of what they do and get involved with, maybe involved with fashion, maybe involved with pure trends, pure entertainment, TikTok to Instagram, and a bit on YouTube as well, but it doesn't always tends to be YouTube influencers. It tends to be Instagram influencers, TikTok influencers, because they're influencing a certain audience, an impressionable audience on a trend, a dance move, clothing, fashion, music, trends like that. Not true crime, not missing people. You don't really get influencers that get involved in that type of stuff or are labelled or referred to as influencers because they do true crime. Now, maybe at times you might get some influencers, females that are into fashion, put makeup on whilst talking about a case, and then externally they've got their own books, they've got the podcasts and the mics and the headphones all rammed in the mouth and ear holes, and they do their own TikTok series of fashion. Influencer on the sideline, or mainly an influencer, and then true crime coverage on the sideline, right? I mean, I cover true crime, I've covered mysteries and stuff, etc., but I'm not an influencer, okay? Who else? Zavgirl isn't an influencer. No thanks isn't an influencer. Tyler Feller isn't an influencer, but there are key individuals who are popular, or once popular, that have got involved in the Dylan Rounds case. Psychics aren't influencers, they're just content creators, right? And some aren't full-time, most are part-time, right? So when you get influencers, it tends to be a full-time person, a full-time position, influencing a crowd of people through trends and fashion and culture like that, not sophisticated educational formal cases. So what Todd Grande said there was a bit of bollocks, okay? Let's just be realistic there. Psychics aren't exactly influencers, and at least the psychics that got involved in the Dylan Rounds case weren't the primary cause for putting Dylan Rounds' case on the map. That's a load of bollocks, that, okay? It's all the other big channels that came on in who are established, who do cover true crime on a regular basis. You know, I didn't do true crime back then because I was doing mysteries, but I transitioned into true crime and I carried the torch whilst everybody else walked away, backed off, whatever, okay? So I did transition and I did branch out eventually, but the presence of others were greater at the beginning. Influencers didn't get involved in this case, and if they did, it would have been on the sideline and it would have only been temporary and half-hearted attempts were made, but they weren't the primary cause for the case being popular. And as I said to begin with, Dylan Rounds' case wasn't as popular as other cases, as was demonstrated with down the line, such as Kylie Rodney, etc. So yeah, Todd, BS there. Moving on, Todd then started going on about spring cleaning, the suspicion around it that it's not exactly a normal thing, and with it all tying in line with Dylan's disappearance and the presence of police and it just going gone, and Brenna putting things in bags and taking stuff away, well, that's suspicious. Todd kept it very short, but you could interpret it as, well, basically Brenna was taking away key evidence and then disposed of it because it links and traces back to Brenna. So yeah, that was Todd was briefly highlighting and how you can interpret it from it. Then moving on, time-lapse video. shirt found. How, well, it seems to tie in line with the phone pings of Brenna being the last person to see Dylan and vice versa. And Dylan being in the presence of Brenna because of the phone pings and the times tying in line with that. But obviously Todd didn't mention it in his video as for proof and evidence about the phone pings tying in line with Brenna. So that's a bit disappointing. But at least mentioning about the time-lapse video from Dylan's phone, which in which the phone was found on the 19th of June or so, 2022. But fast forward onwards to the 14th of November 2022, when that digital forensic dive was done by the forensic crew that then retrieved somehow that time-lapse video. And the family only knew about it 3rd of March 2023, when Brenna was charged with the murder and desecration or abuse/desecration of Dylan Rounds. So the police, the police presence, the LE, knew about the time-lapse footage 14th of November 2022, but the family only heard about it, the parents, the 3rd of March 2023. Big gap, but Todd didn't quite mention that. So that's unfortunate once again. I'm just clearing it up there. But basically Todd was saying how the time-lapse video with Dylan being in proximity to Brenna up to a point, and then Brenna taking over in possession of that phone, seems to tie in with one another, and with the shirt being found later, before Brenna being apprehended, and on top of that with Dylan's DNA being found on it, it seems to just all match together. It makes Brenna look bad and guilty. And then tying in later how with the boots being found very early on, but later being discussed about, besides the blood found droplet on one of the boots, but DNA belonging to Dylan was from the boots, confirming they were Dylan Round's boots. But there was also DNA of Brenna too upon those boots, which were fingerprint touch DNA. So it kind of ties in line there. And with the lies Brenna told originally about what he did with the boots or the mindset behind it, it didn't quite tie in line. Brenna, which was said by Candice Cooley originally, but Todd failed to mention it, that Brenna originally said to Candice Cooley, or just in Round's face, that, oh, not seen Dylan for over 6 months or so, not seen him for a while, boots left behind, put him outside of the grain shed, then I picked them up, then I took him down to my trailer, and then I picked him up again, and I put him behind the dirt mound. So it ties in line with Brenna's DNA found upon him. But for Brenna to say, I've not seen Dylan for over 6 months, but obviously Dylan Round's phone just so happens to be on site on the day of when Dylan is down there, like with the phone call too, in the presence of Lucin on the land and going down to the grain shed property, which the timeline phone pings timeline with, near to the presence of Brenna, then obviously Brenna would have seen Dylan, Dylan would have seen Brenna, and with Brenna originally saying, I've not seen Dylan for 6 months, that was obviously a lie, so it shows more suspicion within Brenna and more guilt there. Obviously Todd didn't quite go into depth there, but I just wanted to make that a little bit clearer again. The next point was about may have got lost. So even though the police were a little bit lenient at the start and not taking it seriously, Todd didn't mention that part about the police and the corruption there and the disappointment of delays and equipment and drones being present but the pilots not, or the pilots being present, the drones are not, but the dogs couldn't be used immediately, the Bloodhound group, because of rain, so it dropped down to a 20 to 25% chance of success in finding Dylan's scent, but any chance is better than no chance. But no, that was ignored early on, and even Texas Equisearch were denied of involving themselves and parting with the family and helping in that sense. No, police didn't want that. Eventually the funds were giving up green lights, fast forward onwards to around, was it August, just before August, before basically the final push before winter time of 2022, which was somewhat influential and focused on the washers and stuff, but that was done late. And that's because the police responsible, LE. Todd didn't mention any of that, but I just wanted to bring it up in general. But yeah, what Todd did mention as his own theory and idea and understanding, the possibility that Dylan Rounds, because of his lack of experience, lack of life knowledge and time spent on the earth and rushing into farming, is there a chance he just got lost out in the desert? You could say that's a bit of BS, because if Dylan Rounds has been there for a couple of years and he's got a certain routine, he's probably going to stick to that routine. And if it did come to walking on foot, walking back, well, Candice Cooley mentioned that Dylan had a certain way of doing it, going diagonal from Grainshed property back to his farm, and cutting across the land, and it was doable for Dylan normally, 5 miles on foot, but was doable, right? So I don't think Dylan Rounds would just simply get lost like that. Could he have got injured? Could he have issues with the environment at the time, the heat levels, dehydration, which then led to, I don't know, Dylan not quite thinking straight? Well, because of the weather, it raining at the time, I don't think it would have been as hot as normal, wouldn't have been as dehydrated. If Brenner did take Dylan out, but not like a fatal hit immediately, you could suggest that maybe Dylan tried walking away and then got lost. No, because if Dylan just got lost, he would have been flat out on the ground and then he would have been retrieved or seen eventually. But that didn't seem to happen. And as well, Brenner would have to go on a wild goose chase trying to track Dylan down to then find and then eventually dispose of him. And there was lack of footprints around the time of, in the early days of Dylan's disappearance, lack of footprints. Right, so that's what Canis Killy was suggesting about. Did Brenner really search? Did they really, if there's not many footprints around? And we talk about footprints, we talk about tracks, because with the rain at the time, Saturday and more so Sunday, in the afternoon of Sunday with great wind as well, tracks would have remained and would have shown in the ground and stuff, and also track marks in a certain wash area could have been related to Dylan, but not taken on board immediately, which then was delayed, and then because of winter time and the tracks that were originally preserved were damaged and couldn't be traced back, or they couldn't do like a mold and try and get the track marks out of it and then maybe compare, contrast after. Wasted opportunity again. Now Todd Grande didn't mention any of that, so that's kind of disappointing there. So I think the bit about Dylan just getting lost like that seems like a bit of a BS point with what we know of over time. But at the end of the day, credit to Todd for just sharing his own thoughts, okay? The other point that was mentioned by Todd, the possibility that Brenner isn't responsible as the killer. There was another killer, and Brenner was just simply clearing up after the killer. Is James Brenner that submissive that he would put his own life on the line and clear up the killer's mess, when Todd Grande contradicted himself later, because Todd said how Brenner was incompetent and an incompetent killer, and I don't know, reckless. Well, if he was reckless, then why is Brenner clearing up after another killer then? Is the other killer reckless or not? I think it was worded by Todd Grande as exculpatory evidence or exculpatory external thoughts gathering as to different possibilities there. At the end of the day, Todd does believe that Brenner was responsible as the murderer, so that at least clears that up. But I just don't. Do I think Brenner was clearing up after somebody else? Other people have suggested it with time and said that Brenner is the fall guy, but I just don't think Brenner would be that submissive to follow along like a robot, clear up, and not bring anyone down with him when getting caught and getting in trouble. Brenner would have had more of a fight and would have done or said more, and he wouldn't have just been passive and submissive, because he can come across as aggressive and confrontational and defensive, so why wasn't that shown at the time? Maybe it's because Brenner was the one responsible, right? Possibly. Moving on, Todd Grande mentioned about believes Brenner's guilty, yeah. But then Todd Grande then said, at the end of the day, the case is pretty cut and dry, straight to the point. It's not that deep. It's not that mysterious. It's pretty simple as to what's happened. I think that's a bit ignorant by Todd Grande. It depends where you lie within the case and the community, okay? If you're an outsider and you only listen to the family and the news crews, you're going to be told quite a linear storyline and time of events. If you were in the presence of the community, the true crime community, which was a bit of a shit show to be honest, it's going to be deeper, much deeper. Could you argue deeper than it really was? Arguably. But if you were in the presence of the family, the news crews, some online, but also those locals, not the family who are further away, but locals in the area, witnesses, Walt and Michelle noticing on the 28th after 3 p.m. a truck leaving the Grainshed property after Dylan's death, tying in with the timestamps, and Brenner long gone, going to Don's place for that barbecue. What was that truck doing on that day? Why did it go? Why did it leave? What was within that truck? Walt and Michelle saw it. A jewelry truck. Suspicious, right? Todd didn't mention any of that, and it was a key witness. Okay. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that. So with these additional things going on, these witnesses, what they saw, what they've heard, I think it's a bit deeper. And with all the twists and turns, right? Because even from the family's point of view, the news crews, the story wasn't exactly told very clearly from the start. It was back, forth, switch and change, inaccuracies made along the way. Yes, it's a work in progress, but with all the back and forth and the other knobs in the background, got a little bit messy, didn't it? So it's not exactly that simple, okay? If you lived a sheltered experience in the Dylan Brown's case, yeah, you could say it's cut and dry. If you're basically Todd Grande and you join late in the case and you just listen to the linear storyline, then you're going to say it's pretty simple, straight to the point. But you need to be there for the ride. You need to be along for the ride from start to finish to truly understand and appreciate the depth of this case. It might not be such a mystery in the sense of the Kenny Veach case, but it's deep in terms of who's responsible and is there any other factors involved, any other people in the background, right? When you look at Justin Round's behaviour towards Don Hatley at a point in time, it raised suspicion there that Don could have been playing a role in favour of Brenner or some kind of witness, right? Was Todd Grande there for that and for Justin Round's outburst at time? No. Okay. Was Todd Grande around when there was resistance from certain people and characters out there from the location or just online that it seemed like they didn't want the case to be solved? No. You know what I'm saying? It's a bit deeper than you think. That's what I would say. So I think Todd was a bit ignorant there, a bit impetuous, a bit egocentric as well. I'm sure they'll know what that means. But just moving on to the next point, Todd Grande believes the motive, the reasoning behind what Brenner did. Okay, so Grande believes Brenner's responsible. Reasoning behind it, Brenner was either angry at the time, not in a good mood, or wanted to steal something from Dylan. He could have been angry and he could have wanted to steal something, or he could have been one or the other. That's basically what Grande believes at the time. Grande missed out some possible key, critical, important points, and let me just make it very clear to you, okay? So around the 30th or so onwards, when Justin Rounds, Kenneth Cooley got down there, okay, post Dylan's death, disappearance, disposing, etc., Justin Rounds, Kenneth Cooley confronted Brenner and just questioned, do you know anything? What's happened? Justin Rounds spoke to Brenner. Brenner responded back in a cold, cool, collective way with not much emotion at all, saying how and Dylan was present, but Dylan was reversing the truck and that ended up damaging the horse gate. The horse gate is within the grain shed. We've seen the gates on the side and one stood up because it's bent, warped, damaged. Could tie in line, right? On the day Dylan was down there with the phone ping tying in line. Dylan reversing his truck. Didn't know that the horse gate was closed. Brenner didn't know Dylan was coming down, so wasn't anticipating any of that. Dylan in a rush too, because of the rain coming on in, didn't want his seed from his truck to get damaged, so reversed in, accidentally broke the gate, made a crash sound, a bang, startled Brenner. Brenner got up, may have already been in a mood, was in a defensive nature, had enough of Dylan, final breaking point, snap moment, Brenner takes it out on Dylan. Why? Well, the anger part, the possible snap, losing control, and that Dylan breaking something of Brenner's. And I did do a psychological analysis in the past. Be sure to catch up on it, of Brenner, the motives, reasoning behind it. I said that there was a defensive-ness in Brenner, that sometimes Brenner can respond in a violent way when defending someone else or something. Kind of like, I guess, what Brenner did to his girlfriend in the past, where he was waving a gun about towards other people, firing warning shots. Directly defending his girlfriend or not quite sure there, but there's a possibility. Defensiveness of a possession, if that's how Brenner perceives a person, his possession. But what about Brenner and his horse, okay? The horse called Briscoe eventually passed away onwards, no longer around anymore. But in the past, it was mentioned before Dylan's situation, in the past, that somebody forgot to shut the gate, which then led to the horse roaming about and escaping Grainshed property, and then Brenner had to retrieve the horse. Brenner was infuriated, enraged, very, very angry. So for Dylan to break a gate, and possibly if Brenner thought that Dylan may have not closed the actual gate to the Grange Shed property, Brenner could have been like, oh no, not again, not again. The horse is going to get loose. Is the horse okay? You know, if Dylan reversed into the horse gate, could the horse have been injured, harmed? You know, based on those line of thoughts, Brenner being very defensive of his horse in the past and responding back in anger, it could have been the same there with Dylan, right? Todd didn't mention any of that. Okay, mentioned that Brenner could have been angry, but why? Well, I've just mentioned and outlined it, okay? As for the stealing part, well, if Brenner really wanted to steal something from Dylan, and like when people say that Brenner took it as an opportunistic moment, like Corey said that Brenner's not responsible, but Brenner was responsible for taking Dylan's grain truck from the farm all the way down to the Grange Shed property. But then how did Dylan end up getting from the farm to the Grange Shed property for the phone ping to end up there earlier on in the day and for the phone call to be made at the gate? That doesn't quite tie in there with Corey. It contradicts what she says. But linking back to Brenner possibly stealing stuff, do you know why I'm doing this? It's because when Dylan was doing custom farm work for 6 weeks, okay, 6 weeks, a fair period of time, 2, 4, 6, 3, 4 months or so. For that, not 2, 4, 6, forget that. Forget what I just said then. But in terms of 6 weeks of custom farm work, okay, Dylan was not at his farm. Dylan was away. Would Brenner have had the opportunity of stealing anything at that point? Well, there was some things laying about. That's what my question is with the importance of the second trailer. When Dylan did custom farm work and took his trailer away from his land at the time, I guess, and his truck, well, there'd be less items to steal, so Brenner wouldn't have the chance there. Maybe that's why he did it when Dylan came back, which led to a confrontation and then Brenner taking out Dylan. I'd understand that. But if Dylan left his secondary trailer behind at his farm, that could have had important items in. You know, my next question would be, in the past, aside from everything, when Dylan was away from his farm, away from Luce and doing other stuff, custom farm work or visiting family, did Brenner, in the past, ever set foot on Dylan's land, scouting, seeing what he could take, or if there was anything left behind? Did Brenner ever do that in the past? Never been mentioned that. If so, then maybe Brenner was waiting for the right time. And that's what correlated to the 28th. So once again, I've raised some questions there and points which Todd didn't mention. Todd Grande does believe that Brenner did shoot Dylan in that method and way. I would say I agree with that, but unfortunately there's been no ballistics. There's been no evidence there to find bullet holes or loose casings. What's happened with all that? And what's happened to the original firearm which may have been used, right? I don't know. I mean, well, I don't think Dylan would have been in possession of his own firearm at the time of the death. If so, I think Brenner would have taken it. But then he could timeline with returning it back. But that aside, Ty Corbin, way back in the past, and I think it still remains to this day, that Brenner did have a personal chrome handgun, but it was missing and it was never found. So that could be the murder weapon, hence why it's missing. Brenner may have disposed of it, right? So, yeah, I do think Dylan was shot, so Todd seems to agree with that. Todd then went on about Brenner accidentally hitting the record button on Dylan Round's phone, hence why you had that time-lapse footage on Dylan's phone. Kenneth Cooley agrees with that. I pretty much agree with that just because of my own experiences of accidentally hitting the record button when I wasn't ready when doing a video. You can accidentally hit the record button. And from what Kenneth Cooley has said in the past with older iPhone devices, like similar to what Dylan had, you can be on the lock screen and then you can suddenly activate the camera mode and then it will record if you press the wrong buttons accidentally. So Brenner could have done the same thing. Not quite up to date with technology, heavy-handed, bit reckless, bit clumsy, unknown to Brenner. That's what happened. Maybe Brenner found out in the end that the record button was on and thought, that's probably why I should dispose of it and throw it into the pond, but still wasn't enough to dispose of the evidence within. So, and maybe another mistake made by Brenner. And we've also mentioned in the past when I did my map analysis of if Brenner truly responsible and responsible for disposing of certain stuff, it was almost reckless. Some things were disposed of very well and other stuff wasn't done so well. And arguably some of the more important items were disposed of worse than some of the less significant items, maybe like the wallet, which has not been found till this day. Maybe because it's on Dylan, and if Dylan's not found, then the wallet won't be either. But the wallet itself, key piece of evidence, but how important? Not as important as Dylan's phone, yet Dylan Round's phone was disposed of more easier than the wallet. You know how that plays out, and maybe some of the items along the way, etc. Todd Grande mentioned about the body. Todd Grande believes that Dylan Round's body will probably never be recovered. That's it, game over, done. Is that a bit cold? It's honest, I guess. Other people have said that themselves with time. But I would only say that the only time when the hope really the hope only goes away almost completely is when Brenner passes away. Because realistically, it's perceived as Brenner being responsible and also responsible for the desecration, hence why he got the charge. So realistically, Brenner would know, would remember, you would hope to think, where he disposed of Dylan. For as long as Brenner is alive for, there's always that hope and chance that maybe a deal can be made eventually. But unfortunately, Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds aren't willing on making a deal because they think if they do, Brenner will be released in the future, a lesser sentence because of Dylan, and then will be released and then cause more harm to other families out there. So it is a selfless act by the family, but it's also making it hard on themselves in getting justice and getting an outcome, dragging it out. Todd Grande mentioned nothing about it. Todd Grande mentioned about the 3rd of March and Brenner being charged, but not about the interview that followed by East Idaho News with the parents mentioning that Brenner was willing to open up about the location of Dylan if a deal could be met, but the family weren't willing to listen and would have turned it down or did turn it down. Why did Todd not mention that? That was another groundbreaking point. Just like the missed out chances of evidence and stuff there which failed, could have traced to Dylan, could have led to a new lead, could have led to an outcome quicker. The same with a deal being made. Excluded by Todd. Is Todd Grande? I didn't see Todd Grande mention any criticism towards the family, the parents, which is a respectful thing, but it's not exactly balanced. Was Todd Grande trying to do it so he didn't get in the bad books of Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds? I wonder, because it's just not that balanced, I would say. Another point mentioned by Todd Grande is the case influencers came in and provided zero meaningful analysis. So I think Todd was mainly referring to the psychics, because the initial point made by Todd earlier on in his video was influencers such as psychics were responsible for making the case popular. And then later Todd said influencers, also known as psychics, didn't provide any contribution to the case. No meaningful analysis. Right. If for whatever point, because it wasn't clear, so let's just make that very clear itself. If on the interpretation, on the basis supposedly that besides psychics, if Todd Grande is referring to influencers as other YouTubers, regardless of the channel size, if Todd was referring to that as well and grouping those people together, saying that they provided zero meaningful analysis, then that would apply to me as well. Does that mean that Todd Grande is indirectly saying that Warlight Raf has provided zero meaningful analysis on the case, besides psychics? Because I can agree what Todd says. Psychics haven't really helped. They've made things worse. But it's not just been psychics, has it? It's been other people who aren't exactly YouTubers, who aren't content creators but have become that because of the Dylan Rounds case origins. A range of people that have gathered together and formed their communities and switched and changed and have been influenced in different ways, which then started being the enabler of BS or the creator of BS or the spreader of BS and telling other people about it. It's not just psychics that have said a load of BS, such as Dylan Rounds was cut up and chopped up, which did negatively influence the community and brainwash people, but all the others who aren't psychics, who aren't YouTubers at the time, but then transitioned into that and made their own videos or appeared on panels and said a load of BS, which didn't help at all, right? So it's not just psychics, let's make that very clear. But if Todd is talking about everybody in general in a very reckless way, similar to how Justin Rounds did when he called out people on YouTube as being nothing good and just bad, don't like it, I mean, that's a bit unfair, because the reality is, it's a fact. I have produced significantly more meaningful analysis than Todd Grande ever has on this case, because I've stuck to one case. He hasn't. He does a range of stuff. So he doesn't know the full story about the Dylan Rounds case. He lacked key points. He lacked key timestamps. He lacked key dates. Previous ones not even included. Additional information not even included. It was lacking. It was poor. Todd Grande's analysis of possible meanings and motives were lacking in substance, not even reinforced with actual events or facts which took place prior to Dylan's disappearance, before, after, whatever. But I did, and I've documented it. You compare one video by Todd Grande, which is a short video, a good summary, but unfortunately when it comes to a short summary, it often leads to lacking in detail. And you compare it to my channel, 442 videos or so made on the case. Well, one stands out more than the other. One has provided more meaningful analysis. Todd's just jumped on in because it's the right time for him to make a coverage on the case. I've stuck with it since, not day one exactly, because I joined 1 month late to the case, but I've been there ever since. So I'd say I provided the most meaningful analysis compared to just about everyone out there, because of the sheer numbers and facts. The numbers don't lie, right? It's pretty evident. Now, any final points made by Todd Grande? Apologies about the chair if you can hear some squeaking. There's no mouse, there's no rats I'm sat on, it's just silly things around me, that's all. Todd's final thoughts, Todd Grande's. Dylan was a determined farmer, but also vulnerable. That being too determined led to taking too many risks and viewing everyone as friendly, and Dylan trusting everybody around him. And maybe lacking experience and knowledge too. But what Todd failed to mention, that in lacking experience led to Dylan Rounds reaching out to more experienced people, and also Dylan Rounds hanging around more older individuals who are presumed more experienced, asking how to do this and how to do that on farming. So there was an influence, there was a level of trust, and maybe too much trust, which is a fair point by Todd Grande. But I don't think Dylan Rounds was completely dumb and stupid. I think he was somewhat alert and aware. He managed to survive so long out there with just Brenner. Because if you think about it, besides Brenner, there's probably a range of other people out there and scattered about who are just as dangerous, if not more. Okay, just like Bibbins. Bibbins is considerably more dangerous and has done much worse than Brenner has. And the evidence suggests it from what we've looked at previously. Did Dylan Rounds get taken out by Bibbins? No, maybe because there was no reason to do so. But what I'm saying is, you put aside Brenner and the proximity, Dylan Rounds, for the length of time he spent in Montello, Nevada, coming in and out and doing custom farm work around, Dylan was always around some rough and rugged characters, but managed to survive. So he did well, give him credit there up to a point. But yeah, I guess wrong place, wrong time. Because take in mind, you can't blame Dylan completely as being completely vulnerable or taking too many risks, as Todd says, because Dylan Rounds has been in the presence of Brenner in the past. Dylan Rounds did custom farm work for about 3 months with Brenner in close proximity. Did they tug each other's hair out? Did they kill one another? No, not then. So it was unexpected this time round. When you're so used to something, people behaving in such a certain way and there's a certain routine, when that suddenly changes or a person snaps, whatever, you're not going to be expecting it. You're not going to be anticipating it, no matter what. You can't be ready for it when you've never seen it before. So you can't blame Dylan in that sense. Todd didn't mention anything about, though, the parents allowing Dylan to go down there. But at the same time, Dylan had his own choices, made his own decisions. But I guess the other key thing that Todd Grande failed to mention was how Don played a role in the case. and how Brenner met Don in the past, and what happened to Don originally with the farming incident, which then led to being introduced to Larry Rounds. Larry Rounds looking after Don happily, Dylan Rounds doing the same thing, taking him to hospital appointments, then getting on well with the family friend, etc., etc. And Don already been friends with Brenner in the past. Todd, don't know when I'm talking too quick, but Don ended up introducing Brenner, longtime friend, to Larry Rounds, Dylan Rounds, and that's how Brenner then started working for Dylan, etc., etc., and Don as well too. But eventually, a week or so, or just before Dylan Rounds did his custom farm work elsewhere, a week before, Don and Dylan had a falling out, and then Don parted ways because of arguments and a washing machine being broken or not working properly, which could have been a motive for Don getting revenge on Dylan or retribution. But even though that wasn't like reinforced with evidence, Todd didn't mention that either. Like, you know, the background factors of possible theories and stuff, it was just all driven by Brenner. So whilst Todd may have done a bit of a balanced video supposedly, or at least tried to explain his own thoughts, his own theories, and also other people's theories about somebody else being responsible, another killer, Todd didn't take the time to make an effort in suggesting who that killer could be, right? Because when you look at my videos, I might not agree with other people's thoughts or chain of views, but I try and see it from other perspectives, you know, a full perspective, different people's points of views all around. But when I do that, I also look into factors as to why they think like that and who could be responsible and how it could play in line with why they're thinking that. Todd didn't. So it's just kind of lacking once again. So at the end of the day, that was it. The most important part though, okay, of Todd Grande's video is the very beginning, where he said he's not like diagnosing anyone officially or anything like that. It's just based on his thoughts and opinions, not to cause slander, defamation, not to cause any trouble or misinformation there. Just here to give you my side of the story, what I think, and also the original timeline of what happened. So Todd, in his wording and approach at the start, was done well. Worded good, but executed in that space of time, maybe a bit poorly done, right? Especially if you're going to make only one video on the case. That's why I do what I do. I might not include everything in one video, but I spread it out because it just works for me. It would be too much to do in one video, right? You do it in one video, you could get burnt out, you could miss out on stuff, you could rush things. But if you spread it out, you got the time and space to lay it out very clearly. And if in the future you want to do a summary of it all, then you can. But if you're only going to appear once, you got to make it count. You got an audience, you got a group, and you want people to learn about that thing, that subject, but you're only making one video, well, you better include everything about it. But Todd didn't. And just like other big YouTube channels that come on in with the Kenny Veach case, with the Dylan Rounds case early on, they only cover so much, not the whole story. Maybe because they haven't got the time, maybe because they cover multiple cases. But, you know, if you're only going to do a half-hearted effort, maybe do multiple videos down the line. Kind of like what I've done, right? But yeah, they're just my thoughts. By the end of the day, I just wanted to include the additional details of what happened with time. Now, arguably, I may have not included every detail in this video, but I just wanted to at least make the corrections and add on to what Todd was talking about specifically, okay? There will still be other things, hence why the depth of this case, which may have not been included here. Don't get triggered. It's just because there's only so much that can be said in this moment in time, and it needs to be relevant to Todd's points or counterpoints to Todd points, right? As I said, there was some comments on Todd's page, quite a few of them from his regular audience, and then the odd person from the Dylan Rounds community and case, like Corey, but I didn't really see any other familiar names. Maybe I didn't scroll down further enough, but as I said, you wanted a reaction, an analysis in response to the analysis of Todd Grande on the Dylan Rounds case. Well, hopefully this was clear enough. Hopefully I didn't speak too fast, but sometimes I speak fast because I want to get everything out there before I forget, especially when there's a backlog of a load of thoughts in my mind. Now, like how I said, in terms of the bullet points, it was literal bullet points, okay? One line, one line, one line. And all of these bullet points are basically what Todd was talking about, right? Everything else what I added on was from here, okay? Now, okay, we didn't mention about the 7:01 a.m. timestamp of Chase Venstre being at Flying J's Snowville on the 28th of May 2022, 7:01 a.m. over there, and Dylan's down here at 6:51 a.m. in Lucerne, as distance apart. So that was one of the factors tying in to prove Chase Venstre's innocence, even though other people don't believe in that. And then Chase Venstre throughout the day, spending time in Ogden, Clinton. Well, Clinton first for KFC, or near to Clinton, because there's no KFC within Clinton, literally, but nearby on a highway there is. And then later on at, I think, 10:30 p.m. at Little Caesars in Ogden, one of those where he was seen on CCTV at a drive-through. So yes, there were still blanks in between. What else was Chase doing, and how did Chase get from here to there? At least from the point supposedly told by Corey and some others that it was Aviles that gave Chase Venstre a lift up to Flying J Snowville. But aside from that, you'll understand that certain points weren't exactly mentioned here because there's only so much that can be said and relevant to Todd's points as well. If you want all the other points and discussions where you can look back at all the other previous videos and comments, I think we'll leave it there because it was quite full on. You could call it a recap of supposedly what went down in the Dylan Rounds case, okay? I mean, this video being 1 hour, 20 minutes, and the amount of views that have been made, 440, and it's kind of been summarised here. Not to the true depth or level, of course, not with the map analysis either, but hopefully it helps. Hopefully you found this video useful. I don't know how exactly I'll word this title. Reacting to Dr. Todd Grande's analysis of the Dylan Rounds case, or Dylan Rounds case, Todd Grande's analysis gone wrong. I don't know. I'll think of something within reason and appropriate nature, and thumbnail too. And hopefully a fair few people see this video, and with time, feel free to like and share because it will help spread awareness, and leave a comment down below because it will help improve the engagement, and the video will be pushed out there more. And the importance is the more people that see this, the more people that are aware and alert that Todd Grande's video was lacking in certain areas. So when people see this video, they can be informed of what supposedly went down at the time within the case of Dylan Rounds. Okay? So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Goodbye and good night.